Scribble notes when I wrote these quotes. If I offend, pardon me, there's more of me to grow. Creative in my process, enjoy the show. The will is different when you recognize the different strokes. Different folks, same goals, we all want the most. So when we reach the top, we can enjoy the toast. The type of bread we get is fresh about the bakery. Told them don't play with me, with or without a degree. Don't question my intensity, bravery. Similar to agencies that want to see you fold. So just pray for me. Pray for me. Einstein with my energy.
Welcome to the Scribble Notes podcast. I am so excited to talk to you again.
I'm excited to be here, man. It feels like it's been forever since our last conversation, because it was like what, end of 2020, roughly.
Yeah, your book wasn't even published yet.
It wasn't. No,
it's been published for a while now.
Yeah. The book's published now. It's in multiple editions and special editions. So there's a lot that's happened.
Yeah, we got to catch up. We got to catch up on all of that.
Yes, for sure.
Why don't you reintroduce yourself to the listeners?
Yeah. So my name is SD Howard. I am a Christian fantasy author, and I write gritty Christian fiction specifically. And so, this isn't your mama's Amish romance, and it's tackling hard topics around, abuse, human trafficking, and the question of why does God let bad things happen? Mm-hmm. And that is the kind of the main themes in book one of the Cities of Wind and Eighth trilogy, which is the City of Snow and Stars. And then I am currently working on book two, which is the City of Stone and Sorrow. And so that's basically what I've been doing. That's me as an author. I'm also an author coach. So I work with my publisher, New Degree Press, as an author coach, helping hundreds of students come through the pipeline, teaching them how to do the same thing that I did with my book, talking on podcasts, writing articles, getting into all sorts of other shenanigans. And it's just a great time. I love helping people bring their books to fruition, giving back all of the amazing stuff that I've learned and continue to learn. That's what I enjoy the most.
Hey, and there's so much learning. I wanted to ask, how was your launch? How's everything been post-launch? Because the book stuff never ends. Like, your first book still needs to be promoted, still needs to be marketed, and you have to work on the second one. How's all this been?
Oh my gosh, mildly overwhelming, to say the least. Going into 2021, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna hit the ground hard, and I'm going to try and do BookBub ads and try and figure out all of these different things that I can try and do to promote my book. And some of them worked, a lot of them didn't.
Time wasted.
And one of the things that I think surprised me the most was how hard book two was to start writing. Because when I sat down and I looked at the overall outline, I was like, okay, I don't write books, I build them. That's kind of what I tell people. So I was like, 80,000 words is my maximum goal, 40 chapters, in the book, and then breaking it down to like 2,000 words a chapter. I know exactly how I can work this. And then I started laying it out. First 10 chapters, boom, done. I have my giant mega plot bomb in chapter 10 of book two, which I'm super excited about. I've already wrecked some of my very, very close super fans, and which, it was enjoyable for me, I have to say.
Of course.
It did the thing that I wanted it to do. They're just like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, a good many things, as it turns out. But it just, I couldn't see what the other 30 chapters were supposed to do. And so in between marketing the book, I'm kind of noodling on what is book two supposed to look like at this point? Because I had the idea for what I was going to do, and then book one changed for the better, but then that kind of threw everything else off. And then characters were like, by the way, you're going to need my entire backstory because I'm a POV character now. I'm like, no, that's not how that works.
You're going to need my whole life.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, just like, I'm going to give you all of the things. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like I kill people off in book 1 to avoid having to have another 7 POV book. But, the characters do as they please. So
as they
going
should.
into like, honestly, like the best part of 2021 was we had this little local event out where I live in Eastern Oregon called Miners Jubilee. I had like 40 some odd paperbacks at that time. And my hardcover was in the works. And I was already working on the audiobook. I had hired somebody from Audible to be able to do it. And it was an in-person event. And I sold almost all of my books and just had a great time talking with people, getting to know people, wearing awesome writing shirts. Like, seriously, it was living the life. And it was really at the midpoint of last year when, the hardcover edition came out, which I was like, wow, this is super exciting. And then my publisher and I had talked, and they're like, would you ever want to do an illustrated edition? I'm like, would I ever want to do? What kind of question is that? Of course I want to do an illustrated edition. You crazy? And so we started the process for doing an illustrated edition. And I did the campaign for that last July and, hit the funding that we needed, began working with the illustrator to come up with 10 beautiful illustrations. And in the midst of all of that, I'm doing the author coaching thing and trying to promote my book and then still trying to write book 2. And it's like, my goodness, like I gotta take, and because I got super ambitious right up at Nano, which is what usually happens. I was like, I'm going to write a short story series in the month of November. Easy peasy. No.
Oh no.
I did not write a short story series in the month of November. I'm just going to get that out there. What I did do, however, was I submitted a story to an anthology that a friend of mine was doing, and that was accepted. And that actually comes out at the beginning of next month, which is super fun. And it's all like tied into like the world that I'm building and stuff. But yeah, I mean, man, marketing stuff is hard. Yeah. And particularly with fantasy, like people have a hard time investing if they don't know whether you're going to pull a J or a George R. R. Martin. Yeah, where it just takes forever. Like I don't have that kind of fan base right now, so
that next book has to come.
That next book's got to get out of here. So the goal is to try and get book 2 done and published this year.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like you touched on a lot of things. I think one of them that's important is like that writing the next book, right? It isn't just as easy as just throwing words on a piece of paper. It takes so much, and the story evolves and changes, especially from the first one. I know when I started writing my trilogy, my second book, I had a lot of fun with it, but it was a challenge. You have to follow up the first effort, and everything people are expecting. You have to almost top the thing you did before because you have to up the stakes. You have to give people more investment. It just becomes more. I know when I wrote my second book, I didn't have trouble writing the outline. I knew where the story was going to end. I had this big plot twist at the end that I knew was going to destroy my readers' minds. And I think every one of them has said afterwards, I had no clue. I had no idea. I should have seen this, and none of them did. So I know that happened exactly how I wanted. But this third book, I don't think it was so hard. It's been so hard to get to the place where I finally feel like I can write this story. It was to structure this story, to come up with conclusive endings. All of that has been by far some of the most difficult pieces of writing because you just never know whether or not the story is exactly how you want it to be. And for a while, I was in that same position of like, I wrote or I had a portion of it outlined. I was like, this is where it's gonna start. Then I had no idea what was supposed to happen next. I literally knew what the first chapter was gonna be, and I had no clue how we were gonna get anywhere else in the story. And it took a while before I was able to finally nail some stuff down. And I think that's just how it is when you start writing. We're writing in a series. It's you get to a point where you have so much going on that you have to find a way, some way, to make that story cohesive and still continue and still satisfying.
Yep. Yeah, like because I'm, in the midst of writing Stone and Sorrow, like I knew that it was going to take a much darker turn. It's just the nature, the characters, they, Trinia, Jaden, Udar, Mandar, Batani, all of them went through some just really difficult things in book one. And those all have very far reaching implications heading into book two, and it was, how do I balance the character growth that happened in book one and continue to evolve on that into book two? Like the themes, and some of the themes that I wanted to address was a deeper dive into human trafficking, and particularly from Batani's perspective, because she's lived this. And then Branwen shows up with her life story, and she's like, yeah, I'm gonna be a POV. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that puts a pickle in things. And then trying to figure out, like, okay, well, what are they going to do? Because I'm tackling, everybody was in the same location basically for all of book one, and now they're spread across half of the map, and then they're going to begin to fragment even further. And I was like, oh my gosh, this story is now going to turn into something that's at least 100,000 words long, because there's so much depth. The additions of the world building are getting deeper. You have the characters struggling with themselves and with their surroundings in a much different way than we saw, because there is no running like there was in book one. Now you're just having to like sit in all of the craziness that is happening. And yeah, it's taken a much more interesting turn than I was ever expecting it to, and which leaves how I maneuver through book three and a lot of the wars that are going to be taking place during that book. It's going to be very kind of nebulous until I finish this one. I already know how book three ends. Like, I've already written that in my head. That's good to go. But how we get there is going to be quite the adventure. Yeah.
I was going to ask, how have you kind of grown as a writer? I feel like I turned Super Saiyan once I finished the first book, and now I feel like I'm Super Saiyan 2 because I finished the second. How have you kind of grown as a writer since finishing that first book and publishing, and then going through the process and then starting up that second book?
Yeah, I think the first 6 months of being an author, I just felt like I had no idea what I was doing. And I didn't, like, I've never done this before. Like I have 32 years of life experience and just over a year of author experience. Like, I barely feel like an adult, let alone an author. And so in digging into my writing style, trying to improve upon that, looking at, marketing, I tried all of the different things. I've taken webinars, I've taken classes, I've taken courses, and, everybody's trying to sell you the same thing. And it's the quick path to success. And so finally I was just like, you know what, let's just screw that and just do what I know to do, which is interact with people, have fun, and just write really good stories. Let's just stick with that. And then I'll leave the rest up to God. And as I was writing book 2, the one thing that, because like I have my whiteboard over here with like my themes and the story themes and all that kind of stuff, I was like, I want to have this world that I have really been creating since I was 16. I want it to feel grounded. I want it to feel real. I want it to feel like if you walked outside, only outside was you stepping through a portal into my world, that you immediately are just like, I understand this. I can relate with this. This is real. And, you know, pulling very heavily from what I've learned from Tolkien on how to do that. And that was really where I've tried to put a lot of my effort into improving my craft. Because that's one of the things that readers in their reviews have said, is that they love the world building. Because somebody basically said, puts the epic back in epic fantasy, which I was just like, oh, my heart. I love it. Because I don't overwhelm the reader with a bunch of useless information, but everything that's world building related is intricately tied to what the character is doing and why it would matter to them, why it impacts them. Because if the world building impacts the character, it then impacts the reader, because that character is who they're moving through this entire world as. And so I was like, I want it to be more immersive. I want to really get into the deep nitty gritty of this world. And so that's what I've been trying to do. And I've actually just recently purchased a subscription to World Anvil, and I am now going full Tolkien on World Anvil. And by the time I'm done, it'll probably be released sometime later this year. There'll be an interactive map with multiple layers. You'll be able to see cities and kingdoms and the different political things, different locations, all that kind of stuff. It's going to be something that people can invest in and really dig in and enjoy. And that comes with learning how to write better, how to be more evocative, how to describe the world for the senses, all those kinds of things. So that those are all of the things that I've been trying to work on, particularly within the last, 5-6 months.
Yeah, there's so much growth there. There's so much growth in writing and then realizing what really works, right? You talked about, I think, giving scenes purpose, giving world building purpose, not just world building for the sake of it, but because it matters to the character. Like an example I think about, it's like you have a character walk through a hall of all these great, iconic people from history, and then they feel small. And you can explain their feeling small as they describe the feats of greater men. And that is the world building sometimes that I think about, right? Like I'm reading, I'm like, wow, this character is pointing out so much and then comparing themselves and the small things they've done, even if as a reader, I recognize the greatness that they've been able to accomplish. And that makes me closer. So I definitely think there's so much value to that. In the World Anvil piece, right? Giving so much weight to the world in that investment, it pays off so much, because as a reader myself, I love to know about the world.
Yeah.
Like I love to know which families have had rivalries and how long these things have lasted, who's been close, who's been far away, and why do those things matter? Where is the conflict? Where isn't the conflict? Why is there peace? Why is there not? In being able to really explore all these things, the different nuances of each kingdom, it just adds so much to the experience. And especially for readers that really care, Like they're going to get an even greater experience from the book when they go to a location that they know about because they followed this already. They know what this place is about. Even if you don't explain it explicitly in the book, they know when the reference is made what that means. It just goes so far, and there's so much to writing that I think that's the fun of it, to be honest. That's what makes it nice for us.
Yeah. And you know, the thing that I love, and this is the reason I fell in love with fantasy in particular, is, you know, when I look at Tolkien's work, you know, the Lord of the Rings is absolutely amazing. There's so much going on there, but what I love even more than the Lord of the Rings is the Silmarillion, because it is just next level Tolkien nerd. If you go through the Silmarillion once, let alone 2 or 3 times, then you're like grandmaster Tolkien nerd. But the beauty that came from the Silmarillion and that depth of lore, when you understand how that impacts the Lord of the Rings, it's just like, wow, there is so much here. And I want readers to have that same feeling when they then enter into my world. Because right now, technically speaking, I've only introduced them to the continent of Wintenaith. You know, that's where this first trilogy takes place. But the world itself is named Retterhold, which is actually Icelandic for trial. You know, you could take that as you may. But I mean, there's so many different kingdoms and peoples and creatures. You know, I'm introducing sirens into book 2. And these aren't, you know, Little Mermaid Ariel characters. Like, these are horrifyingly beautiful monsters who will sing you off a cliff, because that's just what they do. And giving the histories and the lore. You know, I have 9,000 years of world history before the events of book 1. I have a lot of play to do stuff with, and I'm excited to play around with that, because I have already got ideas for different lore and legends and myths and heroic figures of old. You know, like, all of these things are going to be slowly getting fleshed out and put into the World Anvil site. And then, you know, within book 2, I'll be able to kind of touch on some of those, which again, I'm excited about, because it just adds that little extra layer. But that's the thing about world building, is that it's about layers, you know, and there's the really big, cool, shiny objects. And then there's the little things. Like, I have a scene in book 1 where Trinia tries pancakes for the first time. She's never had pancakes before. And she's just like, these are the most amazing things on the face of Wintenaith. Like, how have I never had a pancake in my life? Now, she wasn't a big fan of coffee, but she loved the pancakes. But it's those little things. It's the little things that add some familiarity for the reader. They're like, oh my gosh, I love pancakes.
Yeah.
Like, Trinia is my people, you know? And yeah, it's that type of stuff, to see the reader's reaction, that makes all of the blood, sweat, and tears and angst that we go through as authors being like, is this good enough, when the readers are just like, just shut up and give us the book. Like,
yeah, this
we need this story now.
I like something you said earlier. You said you wrote a short story and submitted it to an anthology, but it is also tied to the world. I love that, because there's so many ways to kind of, I'm on this short story kick right now. I'm trying my best to write 1 short story a month and trying to get it published into anthologies. And one of the things I'm thinking is to add some short stories from my world, with different characters, being able to explore some other lands and other things that connect back, that feed into the story, but you don't need it. But if you do get it, you're really going to enjoy it. So what's that been like, writing that short story? And having that piece that's just floating out there? Do you plan on doing more?
Oh man. So it was honestly mildly terrifying because I had never done anything like that before. And so it was just kind of a spur of the moment. I knew the author. I was like, why the heck not? You know? And so I wrote up something. It was a dumpster fire. Like it was an absolute dumpster fire. I mean, first drafts typically are because you're just trying to get the concept out. And so the concept for the anthology, which is where giants fall, the concept for it was light versus darkness. And I was like, okay. So me being the angsty muffin that I am, decided that, you know what? I tackle hard topics with my writing. I'm going to tackle miscarriage. You know, that's something that people don't talk about, particularly dads. And so I pulled from my own experience and my wife and I, when we lost our first child, and I was like, I'm just going to put it into a fantasy world. But the fantasy world was super vague, and it was basically enough to maybe like squeak through the submission process and get accepted. And then it was. And I was like, okay, what am I going to do with this story now that it's been accepted? I have to make a change because I don't like this. I'll put it in my world. Because I was going to have something similar mentioned in book 3. I was like, here's the tie-in, really kind of between books 2 and 3. And so I made it one of my characters. And he's writing a letter, because I was thinking of like, Apostle Paul and the letters. I was like, man, I just like that style. Plus, here's another thing. I like to test myself. Like, normally you don't write in second person because it's a bad idea. I was like, but I'm going to do it as a letter from a character to another character who's just heard that she's lost her first child. And it's going to be him recounting the moment when he lost his. And I actually pulled directly from my journal that I wrote in to kind of just express the pain and that darkness that descends on you in grief, and how in the end there was healing and there was light. And I shared snippets with my readers, and they screamed in painful agony as I was over here laughing hysterically, because I was like, well, turns out that was a good idea. But yeah, I tackle hard things, and I think that's one of the beautiful things about writing, is that you can explore these types of topics that people don't like to talk about. And it's fiction, so it's safer. And the process of going through that was, again, very nerve-wracking. But I got the developmental edits back, improved on it. I got my copy editing back. Thankfully, I've learned not to use comma splices nearly as much as I did in my first book. So I was patting myself on the back there. And yeah, I mean, it's basically ready to go. But I was like, I want to be known for my stories. And I'm going to build lore around this series, because this is only book 2. The Stone and Sorrow is only book 2 out of the overall series of 12 that I have planned. But I break them down into trilogies. And so like, this is very, very big. And to encompass something like that, I have to think big, and I actually have a side project. So during my illustrated edition campaign, I had a perk where if you got that perk, you got a character inserted into book 2 as a side character. And I had 4 people buy it, and we've been meeting. We skipped December. but we were back at it, and then we were talking through it. They're giving me all of these amazing ideas for backstories. I'm like, guys, you are killing me here. The story's going to be like 300,000 words long if I add POVs to your characters. I can't do this. But what if we did short story anthology? Basically, I'm going to share my royalties with them. So I've got a way to be able to do that. I was like, you guys will be published authors, and you're basically going to get paid to write fan fiction. How does that sound to you? And they were like, all aboard the Hells Yes train. Like, we are there. I'm like, yes. So starting to figure that out with, you know, these three other people, the four other people, for their characters. We're building my world with characters that they're creating. Like, you know, again, thinking big.
Yeah, that is so awesome. First off, like being able to even come up with the idea to incorporate some perk to have people place their character in there is awesome. Then I love short stories for what it can do. It gives you the opportunity to explore smaller stories or segments of the world that otherwise would make your book way too long. And a lot of times what I've found so far is a lot of my short story ideas are just really fun because I know they don't have to be these long, crazily thought out process. Like it's gonna be short. Like it's gonna happen. You're gonna get a piece of this world. You're gonna bite in. You're gonna say, I need to see what else is going on. And all of it's gonna feed into the story ultimately. So having 9,000 years worth of lore to be able to play with, I can see just the thousands of stories that can be told about all of the people who've ever walked the earth and walked your planet and explored the lands, all of their journeys and the things that can tie into the main storyline and be referenced or just noticed. There's so much there. World building is truly one of those things that once you really start writing, you can see how vast and why people can write for so long, because these ideas can come up forever. And I think one of the cool things is you have the vision, right? You have the vision to do it. You have the idea that this is what you want, and you're exploring one continent. And there's so many more. There's so much more left to still do. So that's just super exciting, just from a fellow storyteller, just knowing that there's so much story left. For people who are starting off, because you also coach, what's some advice you give them as they're starting off the journey and as they're kind of trying to build their own worlds?
Yeah. So I think the thing to remember is that this world was very vague when I started it out at 16. You know, I had the original idea that, you know, it felt very Narnia meets Lord of the Rings. You know, that's kind of the theme that I was going with there. And it felt very much like that. And then the second iteration of it was a little bit grittier, a little bit more down to earth, for lack of a better term, and trying to feel very grounded, pulling inspiration from different cultures and people groups and being like, okay, well, what am I going to have inspire me? And so like when you're starting out world building, I'd recommend picking a theme. You know, so like Wintonaith, the majority of the cultures that we actively explore in book one specifically are very kind of Celtic, Irish, and Welsh in nature. You know, that's predominantly my heritage. And I love the names. And so pulling from like Anglo-Saxon and all that kind of stuff. what that allows me to do is create consistency with naming things. Even if I'm still using, let's say, a fantasy name generator, because let's face it, I'm not that creative.
For real.
So, using a name generator to kind of help give you some of those fantasy names. But what that framing does is it gives you, oh yeah, that name looks like it would fit with this kingdom, because this kingdom's got more of that Scottish vibe going on. And I could kind of see that working. And then you could still throw in, some other names in there that don't necessarily fit the, like strictly Scottish. But it just helps you frame how you think about the cultures. One culture is more heavily influenced by like Italian culture. And so like, how does that kind of work out? One has, a very loose kind of Mongolian feel to it that I haven't fully explored and won't for the most part be because they're not major players within the grand scheme of the books. Figuring out what kind of creatures do you want in your world, down to like, I'm going to have a fluffy bunny rabbit that is not going to try and kill people. And then I'm going to have a monstrosity of a bunny rabbit that is going to kill people. Like, figure out that spectrum. One of the fun things about fantasy is the fantastical creatures. Show me something new. Show me something different. Show me the same thing with your unique spin on it. I have trolls. I call them Hellwrecks. And their fists are just massive. They just pulverize a massive boulder into dust with a single hit. And like, you don't want to get hit by that. They're 6-foot centipedes. No one wants to step on them. Like, that's a bad day for everybody. I've got Telgoths and Banshees and Sirens. I've, thanks to my daughter, I now have Bigfoot living up in the freaking ancient lands. So have fun with it, but build it as you go. When I sat down and started writing The City of Snow and Stars, I had no idea what my world was at that point in time. It was supposed to be post-apocalyptic. That didn't happen. And suddenly the first draft was full of like muskets and cannons and all of this other random stuff. And I'm like, what is even happening? I don't know. We're just writing. We're just going to see what happens. I pantsed my way through the whole thing. Then I went back because, again, first draft, dumpster fire. That's okay. It's the concepts that you're needing to get out. But then you go back and then you dig a little bit deeper. Then you kind of iterate on it. And you're like, okay, where do those themes kind of play into? Is there a bigger world? Is it just this continent? What does it look like? I sketched out on a legal size piece of paper the world map. Granted, I realize now that the world is actually bigger because of my own inability to measure distances correctly or consistently. So the world is just much bigger, but we're basically, the 12 books will focus on the map that I've already created. And there's so many different things to explore. When you do that, you're like, man, who lives there? Just ask yourself the question. That's all you have to do. And then if you want to nail world building and boil it down to some of the core essences, here they are: creatures, cultures, creation, conflict, the 4 C's. And if you can ask yourself the questions of what creatures are there, what cultures are there, who are they, what do they do, what is the creation, what is the geography, what is the topography, what is the flora, what is the fauna, what is the sea life? Just ask questions. You just be like, there's fish. You don't have to detail like the name of the species in Latin. Just like, there's fish there. And then the conflict: global, national, personal. And you can do all 3 of them in a book. You could focus on one in particular. You can do kind of a combination of the three. It doesn't matter. Then once you've done that, realize that 2% of worlding is what I call BAST, or big ass shiny things. That's the cool stuff. That's like, there's dragons, there's magic, there's all of this other amazing, there's floating mountains. The other 98% is being consistent with the rules that you have established. That is hard. That has been my biggest struggle in writing book 2. And it'll be even more so in book 3, because I'm establishing the rules of this world and I have to abide by those rules. And if you're going to break it, you better have a really, really good reason for breaking it, because you build a promise to the reader of what they can expect from your world. And if you break it, you have to explain to them why it was broken. And you can kind of leave it mysterious. Like, I have a character do something in book 1 that was already established, saying that's impossible. No one can do that. And then as you learn more in book 2, it is impossible for someone to do that without God's help, or Elohai, as he's called in the book. And there are consequences to what he was able to do. So that's that consistency part. That to me is the number one component when it comes to world building, is just the consistency.
Yeah, that was awesome. I feel like I just took a class right there. If you're listening,
thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah, thanks for coming. You're very lucky for tuning into this one. We're coming up on the end of our time. I wanted to give you a chance, first off, and say thank you, because this was very enlightening. I feel like I can listen to you just teach all day. So definitely take a class if you're if you're an aspiring author and you really want to learn. But also give you a chance to just plug where people can find you, where they can buy your books, and where they can connect with you online.
Yeah, so my website is sdhowardauthor.com. And I have some of my author services available up there. I do everything from helping you figure out and establish your writing process using a formula that I created that it applies to everybody if they choose to use it and learn how to make it their own. It's not learn how to write like me. No one needs that amount of chaos in their life. I help you write like you. And then the next step is like, really, if you're trying to plan out a series, well, what does that look like? I've helped several authors plan out an entire trilogy within about a 30 to 45 minute phone call, because they laid out what their big vision was. They just didn't know how to frame it. And then all the way up to publishing, consulting, and, search engine optimization stuff. So if you have a website, I understand how big of a pain a website can be to manage. So helping you figure out, how do you get found? What are you supposed to be looking for? SEO is a very big, complicated topic that, when it's boiled down, is actually quite simple. And so I try and help people simplify their life and not waste hours and hours on YouTube University like I have. And then in terms of books, my first book, The City of Snow and Stars, is available on Amazon. It's available in paperback, ebook, audiobook, which I'm super excited about, hardcover. It's a case laminated edition on Amazon. And then I actually have a dust jacketed version through Barnes and Noble. And I also have the newly released illustrated edition that has a beautiful redesigned cover and 10 absolutely stunning illustrations on the inside of the book. My illustrator was phenomenal. So that's where you can find me. I'm on Discord. Like, I've got my own Discord server. So if you guys enjoy Discord, like, hit me up on, basically I'm everywhere on the interwebernets. So find me, hit me up, and then I'm happy to let you into the Discord server. I got lots of things that you can peek around and check out on there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been just an amazing conversation. I'm glad we were able to connect again, and I can't wait to keep seeing what you're doing. I might have to pick up this audiobook because I'm loving audiobooks right now. Just I'm going to say that right. Like, just I'm loving the audiobook grind. My commutes are much more enjoyable because of that. So I'm going to have to definitely look at that.
It's 11 and a half hours of pure entertainment.
All right. So if you're listening, thank you for tuning in. This has been another episode of Scribble Notes. Y'all know what to do. Like the video, subscribe, leave a rating, and all that good stuff. Peace out.
Scribble notes when I wrote these quotes. If I offend, pardon me, there's more of me to grow. Creative in my process, enjoy the show. The will is different when you recognize the different strokes. Different folks, same goals, we all want the most. So when we reach the top, we can enjoy the toast. The type of bread we get is fresh about the bakery. Told them don't play with me, with or without a degree, don't question my intensity. Bravery, similar to agencies that want to see you fold. So just pray for me. Yeah, Einstein with my energy.